The rain-slicked streets of the city glistened under the neon glow, reflecting a world of stark contrasts. Within the hallowed halls of the Vance Conservatory, a temple to classical music, an 8-year-old girl named Mia gripped her small violin, her dreams as fragile and bright as the melody she hoped to play. Her single father, Leo, watched from the wings, his worn security guard uniform a silent testament to the life he'd built for her, a life far removed from the music that once defined him. But as Mia's audition began, the melancholic notes stirring deep within Leo's forgotten past, a pair of piercing eyes belonging to Eleanor Vance, the conservatory's formidable director, cut through the quiet, sensing a deeper harmony that would soon challenge everything she believed about talent, sacrifice, and the unspoken language of the heart. The main audition hall of the Vance Conservatory hummed with a hushed reverence, a stark contrast to the bustling city outside. Sunlight, filtered through tall, arched windows, painted stripes across the polished wooden floor. 8-year-old Mia, a wisp of a girl with a determined set to her jaw and eyes that held the universe's hope, stood before a formidable panel. Her small hands, usually sticky with jam or clutching a worn teddy bear, now gripped the neck of her violin, a cherished gift from her father. The air was thick with expectation, the kind that pressed down on a child's tender shoulders. Eleanor Vance, regal in a tailored navy suit, sat at the center of the panel, her silver hair pulled back in a severe knot, her gaze piercing. She had built this institution into a beacon of classical music, but her eyes, though assessing Mia's every move, seemed to hold little warmth. Mia's initial bow draw was shaky, a hesitant scrape that almost dissolved into silence. But then, something clicked. A sweet, clear melody, a delicate Bach minuet, began to fill the vast space, carrying a fragile beauty that belied the child's size. Leo, Mia's father, watched from the back of the hall, near the heavy velvet curtains, his presence a silent anchor. He had taken his lunch break from his night security uniform, but his worn work boots still peeked out from under his hastily chosen jacket. A wave of immense pride washed over him, quickly followed by a familiar ache in his chest. Asterisk. She has her mother's passion. Asterisk, he thought, his gaze softening on Mia. Asterisk, but her own unique grace. Asterisk. Eleanor, typically stoic, leaned forward almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. Intriguing phrasing for her age, she murmured to the panel, a rare, quiet assessment. Mia, lost in her music, felt only the rhythm, driven by her fervent dream. Later that night, the grand edifice of the Vance Conservatory transformed. The bustling halls, once alive with the cacophony of instruments and student chatter, now echoed with Leo's solitary footsteps. His night security uniform, a muted blue, blended with the long shadows cast by the emergency lighting. He moved with a practiced quietness, checking heavy oak doors, ensuring the priceless instruments, Stradivarius violins, rare cellos, and antique harps, encased in their climate-controlled glass displays, were secure. Each glass box seemed to hum with the ghosts of melodies past, a melancholy symphony that only he could hear. His uniform felt like a second skin, a badge of his quiet invisibility in this world of vibrant sound. He was a caretaker of silence, a guardian of dreams that were no longer his own. As he reached the grand auditorium, a low, familiar hum, almost a vibration, drew him in. The sound was faint, a resonant whisper from the massive Steinway grand piano that sat like a sleeping giant on the stage. He pushed open the heavy double doors, their subtle groans swallowed by the vastness of the space. The auditorium was illuminated only by the faint glow of the emergency lights and the stark, silver-blue moonlight that streamed through the tall, arched windows, casting long, dramatic shadows. Leo slipped onto the stage, his worn boots barely disturbing, the dust motes dancing in the moonlight. He approached the Steinway, a magnificent instrument, its polished dark wood gleaming faintly. It was a relic, a vessel that had carried the genius of countless legendary performers. His calloused hands, scarred from years of manual labor, hovered over the keys, a stark contrast to the delicate ivory. He slowly lifted the heavy lid, a soft thud echoing in the stillness. Then he sat, his back to the empty seats, facing only the vast, silent space. He hesitated, his fingers hovering, a deep breath filling his lungs. He began to play, tentatively at first, a single clear note breaking the oppressive silence. Then another, and another, until the music swelled, a complex classical piece, technically demanding, filled with raw, aching beauty. It was a Chopin nocturne, a melody his late wife, Mia's mother, had loved. Each note was a release, a communion with his past self, a whisper to the woman he had lost. The music was his refuge, his only true expression of grief and joy, a torrent of emotion that he held captive during the day. For these precious moments, he was not the night guard, but a concert pianist, soaring, momentarily free from the crushing weight of his mundane life. Eleanor Vance, on the floor above, sat rigidly at her desk, the cold glow of her laptop illuminating the stacks of financial reports and student applications. Her office was as stark and minimalist as her public persona, a bastion of efficiency. She sipped cold, forgotten tea, the bitter taste mirroring the gnawing restlessness that often accompanied her insomnia. A faint, almost imperceptible piano melody drifted through the thick walls, a phantom sound at first. She paused, her analytical mind intrigued, trying to place the sound. It was too skilled, too profound for any of her current students, and far too late for a faculty member. A flicker of curiosity, a rare crack in her impenetrable focus, began to form. The music, though distant, stirred a dormant memory, a faint longing she rarely allowed herself to feel. Unable to dismiss the haunting melody, Eleanor exited her office, her silk robe rustling softly against the hushed carpets. She moved silently down the deserted corridor, drawn by the music's magnetic pull. As she approached the auditorium, the notes grew clearer, more resonant, each one a brushstroke on the canvas of the quiet night. She pushed open one of the heavy double doors, just enough to create a thin, vertical sliver through which she peered. There, on the brightly lit stage, under the stark moonlight, sat Leo Hayes, the night guard. His uniform was unmistakable, a dark silhouette against the pale gleam of the piano keys. He was hunched over the instrument, his entire being consumed by the music. Eleanor watched, mesmerized. Disbelief flickered across her face. This was not the clumsy man who patrolled her halls, nor the quiet, unassuming father from the audition. This was an artist. His hands, which she'd noted earlier, were calloused and strong, now moved with an impossible grace, coaxing a rich, complex tapestry of sound from the instrument. It was a profound, almost intimate trespass, yet she could not tear herself away. The music itself was a ghost of her own past, awakening long-dormant emotions she had meticulously buried under layers of ambition and duty. She watched until the last note faded, the silence that followed even more profound than the melody had been. Morning broke, soft and gray, casting a gentle light into Leo and Mia's small, cluttered apartment. The scent of burnt toast lingered faintly in the air, a familiar aroma of hurried mornings. Leo, already in his uniform, quietly prepared their simple breakfast. Mia, her vibrant school uniform a splash of color against the muted walls, stood in the corner of their tiny living room, her violin tucked under her chin. She practiced her scales, her small fingers still clumsy, occasionally producing a squeak, but her determination was unwavering. Mia stopped, turning to him, her eyes still full of the hope of yesterday's audition. "Daddy, do you think I'll get into the academy? Everyone else there is so good." Leo knelt, gently wiping a smudge from her cheek. "You're the best, Mia. You have heart. That's what really matters." He felt a pang of guilt, a familiar shadow over his own hidden talent. He wanted to give her everything, to smooth away her anxieties, but he felt limited, bound by his circumstances. Mia, hopeful yet a little insecure, looked to him for unwavering support, her innocence highlighting the sacrifices he silently made. Across town, in the faculty lounge, Julian Thorne, a pompous, middle-aged board member and a rival conductor with an inflated sense of his own importance, loudly critiqued Mia's audition to a captive audience of junior faculty. He sipped his overpriced coffee, gesturing dramatically with a croissant. Such potential, squandered by a lack of polish, he pontificated, his voice laced with condescension. The father, a security guard, no less. One must question the home environment, the dedication to the Times Art asterisk. He looked around for affirmation, his eyes gleaming with self-satisfaction. Eleanor, who had just entered, her presence commanding immediate silence, walked directly to Julian's table. "Mr. Thorne," she interrupted, her voice sharp, cutting through the smug atmosphere. "Raw potential is precisely what we seek. Polish can be taught, passion cannot." Julian recoiled slightly, taken aback by her directness, but his envy and ambition remained unchecked. He disliked anything that challenged the established order, especially if it came from a mere security guard. Eleanor felt an unexpected surge of defensiveness, instinctively protecting Mia, despite her own earlier professional detachment. A growing unease with Thorne's blatant snobbery solidified her stance. That night, in the quiet solitude of his small bedroom, Leo held a faded photograph. It showed a younger, smiling woman, Mia's mother, Angela, her dark hair tumbling over one shoulder, her arm linked with a younger, equally smiling Leo. They stood by a grand piano, both dressed elegantly, their joy palpable even in the grainy image. His calloused fingers traced Angela's face, a wave of profound loss washing over him. Asterisk. She would have been so proud of Mia today. Asterisk, he thought, his throat tight with unspoken grief. Beside his bed, a tattered, well-loved sheet music book lay open, its yellowed pages displaying the Chopin nocturne he had played the night before. The music was intertwined with the memory of their love, a silent testament to the life that had been snatched away. He felt the familiar weight of his unfulfilled dreams, a burden he carried alone. Meanwhile, back at the conservatory, Eleanor Vance sat in the dimly lit security office, the soft hum of the surveillance system filling the air. She meticulously reviewed the previous night's footage, her focus unwavering. She fast-forwarded through hours of empty corridors, silent classrooms, and deserted lobbies until she saw it, Leo Hayes, her night guard, walking purposefully toward the auditorium. She paused, then rewound, her fingers deftly controlling the playback. The camera, positioned for security rather than artistry, captured him as he sat at the Steinway, his body language transforming from the stoic guard to the passionate artist. She watched him play, rewind, and watch again, focusing on a particular technically brilliant passage. The raw emotion, the technical mastery, the sheer unadulterated talent radiating from the small screen left her mesmerized. Her initial irritation at his extracurricular activity had dissolved, replaced by a profound curiosity and a growing, grudging respect. The video confirmed his extraordinary skill, deepening the mystery of his presence, his silence. The next evening, as Leo sat at his security desk by the main entrance, engrossed in a worn paperback, Eleanor's presence cut through the quiet. Her footsteps were surprisingly light, almost unheard, until she stood directly before him, her silhouette sharp against the building's grand archway. Leo looked up, startled, quickly rising to his feet. Director Vance. His voice was calm, but a knot of unease tightened in his stomach. Eleanor's presence was commanding, her silver eyes holding an unreadable depth. "Mr. Hayes," she began, her voice low but clear, "I believe you have some explaining to do. About your extracurricular activities." Leo's jaw clenched. "I don't believe I'm doing anything against policy. I secure the premises." Eleanor's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And occasionally, you perform a private concert on our Steinway. A concert that, might I add, could fill concert halls." Leo felt exposed, a hot wave of shame and vulnerability washing over him. He felt caught, his secret laid bare, afraid of losing his job and jeopardizing Mia's future. Eleanor, however, remained impassive, intrigued but maintaining her professional distance. She was testing him, assessing his character, feeling a strange mix of annoyance and fascination. Eleanor gestured for them to step outside into the conservatory courtyard, where the sparse lamplight struggled against the encroaching night. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth as a light rain began to fall, pattering softly on the leaves. She demanded to know his history, why a man of such talent was a night guard. Leo, hesitant at first, his gaze drifting to the droplets tracing paths down the window panes, finally revealed his truth. "My wife, Mia's mother, Angela. She was everything." His voice was raw, laced with the familiar ache of loss. "We were both pianists, met at Juilliard. After she died, a car accident, Mia was just a baby. The music, it felt like a betrayal. Every note reminded me of her, of what we lost. I couldn't afford the luxury of grief or of performance. I had to focus on Mia. The piano became a luxury I couldn't afford." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture one of profound weariness. Eleanor listened, her usual composure unruffled, yet her eyes held a flicker of something new, a pang of empathy. His story resonated with her own unspoken grief, the sacrifices she had made for her career, for the conservatory. "A luxury, Mr. Hayes?" she asked softly. "That was not a luxury. That was a performance, a gift." Leo felt a strange mix of relief and vulnerability. To finally share his burden, to have someone, especially her, C times him. He saw beyond the formidable director Vance, glimpsing a flicker of understanding in her usually unyielding gaze. The rain, a gentle curtain around them, seemed to underscore the softening of their emotional defenses. The next morning, in Eleanor's pristine office, a more formal discussion unfolded. Eleanor, radiating a newfound, albeit subtle, warmth, offered Leo a new temporary role. Night watchman Times and Times resident piano tuner divided by maintenance technician, a thinly veiled excuse to allow him continued access to the Steinway. "I am not offering you a handout, Mr. Hayes," she stated, her voice firm. "I'm offering the conservatory the benefit of your unique talents. We have many delicate instruments that require a sensitive touch." She paused, her gaze direct. "And Mia, well, Mia's talent is undeniable. She's being considered for a special full scholarship, a benefactor program for exceptional, deserving students." Leo felt a rush of conflicting emotions. He wanted to accept for Mia, for her future, but his pride bristled at the hint of charity. He was also wary, fearful of being exposed again, of the fragile stability he had built for his daughter being shattered. "I appreciate the offer, Director Vance, but my job is my job, and Mia's scholarship should be on merit, not pity." Eleanor leaned forward, a rare, almost gentle expression on her face. "There is no pity in recognizing a gift, Mr. Hayes. Only good business. The conservatory benefits from your unique understanding of our instruments, and Mia from an opportunity she truly deserves, on her own merit." Mia, blissfully unaware of the complex negotiations happening on her behalf, was in her small bedroom later that evening, illuminated by the warm glow of her desk lamp. She meticulously researched the Vance Conservatory's scholarship program on an old, slow tablet. The screen glowed on her earnest face as she scrolled through success stories, photos of beaming young musicians. She sketched a picture of herself on stage, violin tucked under her chin, a tiny, confident figure. Asterisk. "If I get in, Daddy won't have to work so hard." Asterisk, she thought, her brow furrowed in concentration. Asterisk. "I'll make him proud." Asterisk. Her innocence highlighted the quiet burdens Leo carried, the sacrifices he made, and the unspoken weight of her dreams resting on his shoulders. Meanwhile, in the opulent conservatory boardroom, Julian Thorne observed Eleanor's subtle shift. He'd noticed her lingering by the auditorium doors late at night, her usually brisk walk slowing to a contemplative pace. He saw her speaking with Leo, the night guard, on more than one occasion. Such an unusual, almost times personal times interest. He consulted with another board member, a portly man named Mr. Davies, his voice a low, insinuating whisper. Eleanor seems unusually invested in a certain night guard and his daughter. One might even say, emotionally compromised. Mr. Davies raised an eyebrow, a ripple of intrigue spreading through the room. "Really? Eleanor Vance? That's unlike her. She's always been so professional." Julian smiled, a thin, predatory curve of his lips. He saw an opportunity, a weakness to exploit, believing Eleanor's integrity, her career, and by extension, his path to ultimate control of the conservatory, lay vulnerable. The next few weeks established a fragile, unexpected rhythm. Night after night, the conservatory auditorium became a sanctuary. Leo, now officially the piano maintenance technician, would play. Eleanor would enter silently, usually in a dark silk robe, taking a seat in the shadows of the balcony, listening, completely still. The rain often accompanied these late-night sessions, a gentle percussion against the tall windows, amplifying the intimacy of the shared space. She started coming regularly, her presence no longer a surprise, but an anticipated comfort. One night, she joined him on stage, a beautiful antique violin case in her hand. She opened it, carefully lifted the instrument, and played a haunting passage. Leo responded on the piano, his notes weaving around hers, creating a quiet, melancholic dialogue. "You have a gift, Mr. Hayes," Eleanor said, her voice soft after a particularly moving duet. You make the instrument sing. Leo's fingers stilled on the keys. It only sings when it's played with heart, Director Vance. Eleanor met his gaze, a rare warmth in her eyes. Please, call me Eleanor. In these shared musical moments, amidst the vast silence of the conservatory, Leo felt a profound healing, a sense of being seen and understood for the first time in years. Eleanor, too, felt a softening within her, a rediscovery of her own passion for music that had been buried under layers of duty and grief. A fragile connection formed, a shared language that transcended words. One evening, back in their cramped apartment, Mia discovered her father's old sheet music for piano, tucked away in a dusty box under his bed. She pulled it out, her small brow furrowed in confusion. "Daddy, why do you have piano music? Do you play?" Leo, busy fixing a loose hinge on her closet door, froze. His hands, usually so steady, faltered. "I used to, sunshine," he said, his voice hesitant. "A long time ago." Mia's eyes widened with curiosity and wonder. "Can you play for me?" Leo's heart ached. He wanted to share this part of himself with her, but he was afraid of opening old wounds, of the raw emotion that playing for her would surely bring. "Maybe someday, when the time is right," he promised, a quiet hope fluttering in his chest. The rain fell heavier that night, drumming against the large windows of Eleanor's office. She and Leo sat there, the soft glow of a desk lamp illuminating their faces, discussing a subtle nuance in a particularly challenging classical piece. Eleanor, in a rare moment of vulnerability, confided in him. "Sometimes," she began, her voice barely a whisper, "I used to get so much stage fright, I almost gave up. Thought I wasn't good enough." She paused, her gaze distant. "My own mother. She always wanted me to play. Died before she ever saw me truly embrace the music." A hint of unspoken grief, a raw edge, surfaced. Leo nodded, understanding without words. "Silence can be a language all its own," he echoed, recalling his own earlier thoughts. "Sometimes," she continued, "the greatest artists are those who have known the deepest silences. The ones who pick up an instrument not just to perform, but to simply breathe." A profound sense of vulnerability settled between them, Eleanor exposing a part of herself she usually kept hidden, recognizing a kindred spirit in Leo. He, in turn, felt a growing sense of trust, seeing beyond the formidable Director Vance to the woman beneath, a woman capable of deep feeling and shared sorrow. The pouring rain outside seemed to accentuate the intimacy of their shared quietness. Julian Thorne's office, despite the gloomy weather, was bathed in the harsh glow of his desk lamp. He meticulously reviewed a fabricated report, a malicious tapestry woven from half-truths and outright lies. Working with a disgruntled former security guard, a man he had paid handsomely, Julian crafted an accusation that Leo Hayes was not only misusing conservatory property, the Steinway, but was also neglecting his duties, and, more dangerously, having unauthorized personnel, Mia, on the premises after hours, a blatant lie. He smirked, the corners of his lips curling in triumph. "We need to paint a clear picture of dereliction," he instructed his accomplice over the phone, his voice smug. "And perhaps a hint of impropriety. Eleanor Vance prides herself on her immaculate reputation. Let's see how she handles a scandal." Vengeance fueled him, his arrogance a shield against any flicker of conscience. He was determined to expose Leo and damage Eleanor's career, believing the conservatory was his rightful domain, and Leo's very presence an affront to his refined sensibilities. The morning of Mia's final, high-stakes audition dawned gray and drizzly, mirroring the tension that hung heavy in the air. The main auditorium, usually a place of quiet practice, felt charged with anticipation. Mia, vibrant and animated, chattered excitedly about her new violin lessons, her scholarship, and the grand old conservatory that now felt like a second home. Leo watched her, a new sense of peace and purpose radiating from him. The weight of his hidden past, of his suppressed dreams, had finally lifted. Mia, dressed in her best dress, her small violin clutched tight, stood backstage, her heart thrumming against her ribs. Leo, watching from his usual spot at the back, felt his own heart race. This was it, Mia's last chance for the full scholarship. Eleanor sat on the judging panel, her expression serious, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. She glanced at Leo, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. Julian Thorne, conspicuous in his expensive suit, was also present, seated among the board members, watching them with an unnerving intensity. Such a times charming times father-daughter duo, Julian drawled, leaning over to Eleanor, his voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. One hopes the girl's talent isn't exaggerated. Eleanor's gaze turned cold. Her talent speaks for itself, Mr. Thorne, she replied, her voice steely, her focus returning to Mia. She felt a growing dread, a premonition of Julian's cruel intentions. Just as Mia hit a particularly delicate passage, a soaring, hopeful melody that seemed to defy the gray morning, a sharp, jarring noise cut through the air. Julian Thorne, with a dramatic flourish that would have suited a stage villain, stood up, a thick folder clutched in his hand. "I regret to interrupt," he announced, his voice booming through the auditorium, silencing Mia's violin mid-note. "But I have irrefutable evidence of a serious breach of protocol and blatant favoritism, jeopardizing the very integrity of this institution." Mia's playing faltered, her small face crumpling in confusion and fear. Leo's jaw clenched, his body tensing, ready to surge forward. "This has nothing to do with Mia," he growled, stepping out from the shadows. Eleanor, rising from her seat on the panel, her eyes blazing with fury, faced Julian. "Mr. Thorne, you will sit down." The fragile melody of Mia's audition, and the fragile hope of Leo and Eleanor, shattered into 1,000 pieces. The storm had finally broken. The boardroom was a maelstrom of hushed murmurs and shocked gasps. Rain lashed against the tall windows, each droplet a punctuation mark for the rising tension. Julian Thorne, a triumphant smirk twisting his features, laid the falsified report onto the polished mahogany table. He began to read, his voice dripping with condescension, painting Leo as a lazy, opportunistic employee who had abused the conservatory's sacred instruments and neglected his duties. He even implied inappropriate conduct between Leo and Eleanor, subtly weaving in accusations of gross misconduct and blatant favoritism. Leo, present at Eleanor's insistence, stood beside her, his shoulders squared, his jaw tight. He tried to interject, to defend himself, but Julian merely waved a dismissive hand. "This man," Julian sneered, gesturing at Leo with the report, a mere security guard, found abusing the conservatory's prized Steinway, neglecting his duties, and fostering an inappropriate relationship with the director. "I was playing the piano to honor my past," Leo finally managed, his voice low but steady despite the burning humiliation, "and to find solace. I never neglected my duties." Julian scoffed, a theatrical roll of his eyes. "Solace? Our Steinway is not a therapy couch, Mr. Hayes. It's a concert instrument, a relic of unparalleled value, not a plaything for staff." Eleanor, her face a mask of controlled fury, rose slowly. "And it is under my purview, Mr. Thorne," she countered, her voice dangerously calm, "to decide its proper use." She felt a searing anger, not just for herself, but for Leo, for Mia, for the blatant disrespect to the music itself. Julian's arrogance was reaching a fever pitch, confident in his victory. Leo, however, felt a profound shame. His secret, his refuge, had been twisted into a weapon against him. He was being judged, not for his integrity, but for his station, and the injustice of it was a bitter taste in his mouth. With a sudden, decisive calm that cut through Julian's smug certainty, Eleanor looked directly at the board members. Her eyes, usually so sharp and analytical, now held a fierce, quiet resolve. "Mr. Sector and Recive Quiet. Thorne," she began, her voice clear and strong, "you claim to understand music, yet you dismiss a talent you haven't even heard. If you are so concerned about the sanctity of our instruments, perhaps you should witness the truth of his talent firsthand." Julian's smug expression faltered. "I propose," Eleanor continued, her gaze unwavering as she challenged him directly, "that Mr. Hayes demonstrate the true abuse of our Steinway. Right now." Julian sputtered, his face flushing. "He's a security guard. What could he possibly demonstrate that would justify this charade?" He glanced nervously at the other board members, who, intrigued by Eleanor's unexpected turn, exchanged uncertain glances. Leo, stunned, looked at Eleanor, a wave of terror mixed with reluctant determination washing over him. Was she truly suggesting this? Minutes later, a strange assembly gathered in the grand auditorium. The board members, Julian fuming, Eleanor impassive, and Leo, his heart hammering against his ribs, stood on the stage. Mia, having heard the commotion, slipped into the back row, her small face etched with worry, her violin case clutched tight. The rain still pounded outside, a dramatic accompaniment to the unfolding drama. Eleanor gestured to the Steinway. Leo hesitated, his gaze darting to Mia, then to Eleanor, who offered a subtle, encouraging nod. He walked slowly to the piano, his hands trembling as he sat there. The vastness of the empty auditorium suddenly felt oppressive, the weight of everyone's expectations crushing. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and allowed his fingers to tentatively seek the keys. He began to play, the opening notes of the same complex, emotionally charged Chopin nocturne he had played that first night. The music, hesitant at first, slowly swelled, filling the room with a profound, aching beauty. It was a narrative of grief, of lost love, of resilient hope that refused to be extinguished. His hands, no longer trembling, moved with a raw power and refined skill that defied his worn uniform, silencing every murmur, every skeptical thought. He poured his entire soul into the music, releasing years of suppressed emotion, his fear giving way to pure expression. Eleanor watched him, tears subtly welling in her eyes, a silent testament to the beauty she had almost forgotten. Julian Thorne, however, sat in stony silence, his face pale, the arrogant smirk replaced by visible discomfort as he realized the depth of his misjudgment. Mia, at the back, watched her father, her eyes wide with awe and dawning pride, slowly realizing the secret he had kept hidden for so long. When the last note faded, hanging in the air like a shimmering ghost, the silence that followed was even more profound than before. The board members, visibly moved, remained in stunned quiet. Julian, his face now a sickly shade of gray, tried to stammer a protest, but Eleanor, her voice clear and decisive, cut him off. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her eyes fixed on him with cold triumph, "your accusations are baseless. Mr. Hayes's talent is precisely the kind of passion we foster here. An asset, not a liability." She then turned, her voice softening as she addressed the room. "And as for his daughter, Mia, she has, entirely on her own merit, been awarded our full scholarship." A gasp rippled through the room. Eleanor then looked at Leo, a genuine, soft smile gracing her lips. "Mr. Hayes, your piano maintenance role has been made permanent, and your new title, effective immediately, is Artist in Residence." Overwhelmed, Leo could only nod, a profound wave of relief and gratitude washing over him. Julian, defeated and humiliated, slumped in his chair, his ambition thwarted. Eleanor, on the other hand, felt a quiet triumph, not just professionally, but personally. A warmth she hadn't felt in years bloomed in her chest. Mia, a whirlwind of joy, rushed to Leo, throwing her arms around him, her small body trembling with excitement. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. Then he gently led her to the Steinway, sitting her down beside him on the piano bench. With a soft smile, he began to play a simple, joyful duet, a familiar children's tune Mia knew on the violin, adapted for the piano. Their fingers, one set small and hesitant, the other large and practiced, danced together across the keys, creating a melody of pure, unadulterated happiness. Eleanor watched them from the wings, a genuine, soft smile on her face, feeling the warmth of their connection. "Daddy, you're amazing," Mia exclaimed, her eyes shining up at him. "Why didn't you tell me you played like that?" Leo laughed, a rich, full sound that filled the auditorium. "Some music, sunshine," he replied. "Squeezing her hand is meant to be discovered." The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window of Leo and Mia's small apartment, painting the cluttered room in warm, golden hues. The air was light, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the faint, sweet scent of Mia's practice. Mia, vibrant and animated, chattered excitedly about her new violin lessons, her scholarship, and the grand old conservatory that now felt like a second home. Leo watched her, a new sense of peace and purpose radiating from him. The weight of his hidden past, of his suppressed dreams, had finally lifted. "Daddy, can you teach me piano now?" Mia asked, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "We can play together." Leo's heart swelled. Absolutely. Sunshine. Every day. His sacrifice for her had led not only to her triumph, but to his own redemption, to the rediscovery of a lost part of himself. In her office, Eleanor Vance sat at her desk, but her usual stack of financial reports lay untouched. Instead, she was looking at a worn piece of sheet music, her fingers subtly tapping the rhythm. Her office, once so stark and minimalist, now held a small, vibrant potted plant on the corner of her desk, and behind it a framed, faded photograph, a younger, smiling Eleanor, her hair long and unbound, holding her own violin, a carefree joy in her eyes. She looked out the window, a thoughtful, softer expression on her face. Perhaps, she whispered to herself, the words barely audible, perhaps some dreams are never truly lost. A profound internal shift had occurred. She was less guarded, more open. The raw honesty of Leo's music, the pure joy of Mia's ambition, and the unexpected connection she had found with them had reignited her own passion, thawing the carefully constructed layers of ice around her heart. She found herself contemplating new initiatives for the conservatory, ideas focused not just on technical excellence, but on nurturing raw talent, emotional expression, and community connection. Later that day, on the sun-drenched grounds of the conservatory, Leo, no longer in his uniform but dressed in smart casual clothes, walked Mia to her violin lesson. Her small hand was nestled in his, a picture of contented peace. As they passed the main entrance, Eleanor Vance crossed their path. She stopped, a genuine soft smile gracing her lips, a sight few had ever witnessed. "Mia," she said, her voice warm, "I heard your practice this morning. Beautiful." Mia beamed, her face lighting up. "Thank you, Director Vance." Eleanor then turned to Leo, her eyes holding a deeper meaning. "Mr. Hayes," she began, "perhaps we could discuss the programming for the spring concert. I believe your input, as our artist in residence, would be invaluable." Leo's heart swelled with gratitude. "I'd be honored, Eleanor." He paused, meeting her gaze, a profound sense of belonging washing over him. "And thank you," he added, his voice soft, "for seeing me." Eleanor's smile deepened. "Thank you, Leo, for reminding me what music is truly about." Months later, the grand auditorium was bathed in a warm golden light, alive with the excited murmurs of a packed house. It was the annual community concert, and the air thrummed with anticipation. Mia, confident and radiant, her violin bow moving with a newfound grace, performed a beautiful solo. Her melody, clear and strong, filled the hall, a testament to her talent and dedication. In the audience, Leo watched, his eyes shining with pride, a profound sense of peace settling over him. Eleanor sat beside him, her hand resting gently on his, a quiet symbol of their intertwined lives. After Mia's final, soaring note faded and the audience erupted in thunderous applause, Leo rose. He walked to the piano, a quiet strength in his stride. He bowed to Mia, then to Eleanor, a gesture of profound gratitude. Then he sat and began to play. The music that poured from the Steinway was a powerful, joyous piece, a vibrant blend of classical precision and raw, soulful improvisation. It was a celebration of found dreams, of enduring love, and of the unexpected harmony that can emerge from the quiet corners of life. The camera swept across the stage, capturing Mia's proud, beaming smile, Leo's impassioned performance, and Eleanor's serene, fulfilled expression, knowing that the conservatory's heart, and her own, had finally found its truest melody.